Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Safey here with Anthony Broom. He's got the Michigan helmet behind him, I think. And I think some Michigan home field apparel, which we'll talk about a little bit later. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit the thumbs up, hit that like button if you want Michigan to win its first national championship since 1997. Also hit the subscribe button as well. We're going to have content throughout the season coming up here. Press conferences, podcasts, all sorts of stuff. So thank you for doing that. And as always, go to thewolverine.com for all of our coverage. Become a premium subscriber over there for the latest on Michigan football, basketball, and recruiting. We are brought to you by Home Field Apparel, the premium collegiate apparel brand based in Indianapolis. Home Field has a commitment to creating incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. There are over 150 colleges to choose from, including your Michigan Wolverines. Home Field is dedicated to delving into the archives and history of Michigan to discover unique logos and iconic moments to create thoughtfully designed products. Home Field is perfect for showing off team pride as college football returns. People watching on YouTube can see the website there, see some of the products. Head to homefieldapparel.com. Use the promo code Wolverine23. That's no spaces, Wolverine23 for 15% off your first order with Home Field. AB, you got some new product there. It looks pretty good.
Yeah, this is actually an older design of theirs, but given that this is day one of our partnership with our friends at Home Field, Connor is a great guy, runs a great company in the heart of Big Ten country. Of course, we've made a lot of trips to Indianapolis over the last couple of years. That's where Home Field is. So shout out to Connor and his team. Shout out to Home Field. And yeah, if you're into the vintage apparel, I mean, dating back to a couple years ago when I was at the other site, I've just got drawers full of their stuff. It looks cool, but more than anything else, it's the most comfortable stuff I have. The hoodies, sweatpants, t-shirts. I cannot of any ad read that we've ever done. We love all our sponsors. This is the one I by far have the most of at my house. So excited to have them on with us.
No doubt. So go to, again, homefieldapparel.com. Use the promo code Wolverine23, Wolverine23, no spaces. That's 15% off your first order. So take advantage right now. Get geared up for the football season, which is coming very quickly. Michigan football, 7 practices in AB. This morning, we got to talk to Sharon Moore, offensive coordinator and line coach, and Jesse Minter, defensive coordinator. So we'll talk about some of what they touched on, and we'll start with Sharon Moore. You got to start with the offensive line. I feel like when you talk about Sharon, but also when you talk about this Michigan offense, because it's kind of built from there out. And Jim Harbaugh saying at Big Ten Media Day, they have 10 starting caliber guys. Sharon Moore said, yeah, it's 10, maybe 11 or 12. So they could be, even deeper than maybe we thought based on what he's seeing so far during fall camp. But, he said some of those offensive line competitions, those position battles at left tackle, right tackle, and even center could last throughout fall camp. He doesn't necessarily have a set date on when he wants those to be settled. Obviously you want to get your guys to gel together, but he said these guys are so close, on and off the field that he's not too worried about that. He wants the competition to bring out the best in everybody, feels that is happening right now. And he did mention, he said, yeah, we'll figure it out, by the first game or first couple games. He kind of slipped that in there. And it's kind of another indicator of what Harbaugh talked about at Media Day, that some of these position battles could go into the season. You have a late non-conference schedule, starting with East Carolina, UNLV, and Bowling Green. You could see some maybe rotation there if things aren't settled. But, he said we have 4 starting tackles. Harbaugh talked about the 2 starting centers with Drake Nugent and with Greg Crippen there. But specifically tackle. He talked about Ladarius Henderson, his transition from Arizona State, but not only that, his transition from playing guard the last 3 years to going back to tackle, where he played as a freshman in 2019 there in the Pac-12. So he said it's a process. It's going to be an adjustment. He's only 7 practices into it. He didn't join the team until the summer, but he's going through it. I guess your take on kind of these comments, on the offensive line, that basically things are, where they were when fall camp started. The competitions are raging on.
Yeah, and of course, a couple days ago, I think it was maybe Tuesday or I believe it was Tuesday, was the first full day in pads. And that's where we've talked about this before too. That's where, everyone kind of starts hitting their stride in terms of what these battles are going to look like, who pulls ahead in the pecking order. Once everyone's out of shorts and t-shirts, it's game on. And this is where, we're still kind of operating out of the belief that, Jim Harbaugh's probably going to be gone the first few days or the first few games of this year. This is where, you look for, where does Michigan find that edge? Even without the Jim Harbaugh suspension, how does this team find the edge after doing what they've done these last 2 seasons? And the fact that there are still so many important jobs up for grabs, and probably will be in the early stages of the year, to me adds a little bit of juice to a non-conference schedule that would otherwise, just like last year, not really do a whole lot for people, and certainly will kind of be roasted nationally. But, as far as the offensive line goes, we've continued to operate out of the belief that it will be Henderson that winds up winning this job. I think the fact that he did, there's a clear plan for him, right? When you bring in a guy who's played guard for the last 3 years and you bring him into your program and the expectations that he's there to start, I think that they clearly believe he could be the guy for them at left tackle. Of course, he did play that in his freshman season at Arizona State. So again, it's all about hitting that stride and finding your comfort level with those guys up front. To me, I know, lots been made about the numbers game and, we have as many as 10 guys that can start. To me, it's really that right tackle spot that intrigues me. Now, if Henderson stumbles, could I see a scenario where maybe Carson Barnhart's your left tackle and then you have those other guys figuring it out on the other side? I could see that. But to me, I think that's really the battle to me, because even the center spot to a certain extent, I think that is I think Drake Nugent is basically a shoe-in for that as well.
Yeah.
But right tackle, Trente Jones, Miles Hinton, Carson Barnhart, I would have Barnhart ahead of all 3 of them. But it's good to hear that it's been good competition. Sometimes that's coach speak, and then, some of the intel comes out and you hear, oh, well, this guy's actually pretty clearly ahead, and the rest of it is all just kind of, we'll see what happens. But it's good to hear that in these first few days, it has been true competition. And, if you want to spot on this offensive line, if your name isn't Zach Zinter or Trevor Keegan, you got a lot of work to do the next few weeks.
Yeah, and I don't think it's coach speak either, because we've seen all these guys play college football, whether it's at Michigan or elsewhere. A few guys coming in from the Pac-12, and Sharon Moore was asked about that too. I mean, how do you weigh guys like Carson and Trente, the fact that they've played in this system, they understand it, they know the expectations? How do you balance that against, some of the guys that are coming in? They're a little bit newer. Do you maybe go with the experience, the guys a little bit better? And Sharon said, no, it's all about the tape. It's all about who's playing better in practice, and then eventually who plays better in the game. So it's not like those guys have a leg up inherently, but at the same time, they're talented. I don't worry about Ladarius Henderson picking up the playbook. I talked to him, I think the day he committed back in December, and I was asking him about that, how Olu Olutimi came in so prepared. He knew the playbook by the time spring ball began, last year. And he said that he doesn't think that's going to be a problem for him. He came in as a freshman in 2019 at Arizona State, started at left tackle, as we mentioned, but also he said he was teaching some other guys the playbook that had already been there for a couple of years by the time fall camp rolled around. So, he's definitely a smart kid. He is a worker. So I don't worry about that, but I do think if he wins that job, it's going to be earned. If he, wins it and then somebody else ends up taking over, you feel like you have enough behind him where it's not too much of a concern. So it's not a huge worry for me, although I do think it is an adjustment, as Sharon Moore said, with him going back to tackle after 3 years at guard. But yeah, that's kind of where the offensive line stands at this point. He was trying to ask about Drake Nugent, but they ran out of time, so didn't get a ton on the centers. But the tackles, it sounds like things are raging on. And the interesting thing about the tackle battle too is that they play into each other. Like the left tackle battle, if Carson Barnhart doesn't win there, he could win right tackle, that sort of thing. Let's move on to wideouts, though, skill position players. J.J. McCarthy said this week, as we talked about on Monday, that Tyler Morris is going to make a big name for himself. Sharon Moore was kind of listing the wide receivers, and in that top trio, he lists Cornelius Johnson, Roman Wilson, Tyler Morris. And then he says, oh, you also got the, Darius Clemens. Then you talked about the freshmen, how they're explosive. They're making some plays, flashing early on in practice. But I think it's more validation or more confirmation that Tyler Morris is kind of right there right now.
He is. And, like I said, known commodities at the top of the depth chart. To me, it's really been a matter of, is Tyler Morris going to be the guy? And he slides into the slot, and then you have Roman and Cornelius on the outside, or does Darius Clemens come out of nowhere, and then all of a sudden Roman Wilson kicks to the inside? And so they have options there. That could still happen in certain configurations, but everything we've heard about Tyler Morris is that the chemistry is obviously built in with JJ McCarthy. Those are well plowed grounds at this point. It's almost becoming the new. Hey, did you know that Matthew Stafford and Clayton Kershaw were high school baseball, pitcher catcher, whatever it was. So we've got all that ground covered, right? But Tyler Morris, I mean, he's going to be a guy for this team that I think is comfortably just going to be. First off, I think he's going to find a knack, just be one of those guys that has a knack for getting open. And maybe he's not like a number one. Maybe he doesn't wind up being a number one wide receiver before his college career is over. But he is a guy that is going to find seams in the defense. He's going to could be one of those type of zone buster type of guys where you just sit where the soft coverage is and move the chains and get open, run good routes, all of that. So the fact that it doesn't feel like manufactured hype with him. I think the fact that, he is a year removed or a couple of years removed now from that ACL injury, he's got the opportunity ahead of him. He's got the familiarity with the quarterback. It's good to see that he is still continued to shine. I really do think he has a chance to be an extremely quality player for this Michigan offense.
No doubt. I think you mentioned the ACL injury. I feel like people, because of that, he suffered that in, the spring of his senior year of high school. And then, or it might've been his junior year or going into his senior year because they pushed back his junior season and then had to miss the senior year. But he dropped in the rankings a little bit. He wasn't a guy people talked about as much when he was a recruit at the end after he committed to Michigan. But this was a guy who was in the top 100. This is a guy that even finished in the top 150, top 200 on every single service. So he's got a lot of talent. I think that's the case too for Darius Clemens. But right now you continue to hear more about Tyler Morris a little bit. And then I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Roman Wilson, who my guy, I feel like I've been saying this guy's going to lead the team in receiving. People know that have listened. But Sharon Moore with some strong comments there saying he's had a phenomenal camp so far. He thinks he's going to take a next step, that his leadership has really been a lot, not better, but just increased, given the fact that he's a senior now. Ronnie Bell's gone, and he's had to step up in that regard. He loves his swagger. He said, that he brings, and I think we all kind of know what that is with Roman Wilson. He brings a little extra juice out there, but I continue to, feel good about feeling that Roman Wilson's going to be, the lead guy for this team. And Sharon Moore did mention too, he doesn't want it to be one go-to guy. He wants it to be where everybody is an option to make big plays.
You want it to be a pick your poison type of offense. And that means one, like we know that this Michigan team doesn't have they don't have Marvin Harrison Jr. So it's not going to be a non-negotiable where you have a guy that you need to make sure he gets X amount of targets. I think depending on the given week, it could be Cornelius Johnson. It could be Roman Wilson. It could be Colston Loveland or Tyler Morris or what have you. But Wilson's intriguing to me. And this is the thing that's a little, I don't want to say it's been overblown, the lack of talent in the wide receiver room, but I think Cornelius Johnson was a 4-star recruit. Roman Wilson was a 4-star recruit. Tyler Morris was a 4-star recruit. So they do have talent there. It's time to develop those guys a little bit better. But on the topic of Roman Wilson, I just need him to be a little more consistent. And I feel like that's something I've been harping on the last couple of years. He has been a guy, think back to last season. He had 3 touchdowns on his first 4 touches period of the year. They got him involved a little bit, in some of the gadget plays and in the run game. Obviously, we know what he can do as a deep threat. We saw that in the TCU game. It just seemed like between non-conference play and that TCU game, and I think there was a concussion or a wrist injury or something in there at some point that kind of hampered him a little bit. But you need a little bit more from him on a week-to-week basis. You know what I mean? And it's going to be, it's going to be interesting to see how they use him, because I think he can be, I think he can be a deep threat. I think he can be someone who, does some damage on a slant over the middle of the field. I think you can probably get away with handing off the ball to him a time or two, doing some creative things with him. So using him, all this conversation has been about using Blake Corum and using Donovan Edwards more creatively. I really do think there's a lot more you can do with Roman Wilson, because right now, and we'll see, but at least from a straight line speed perspective, he might be the most explosive player on this team. It's just a matter of putting everything else together.
Yeah, he might be the fastest. He's a great route runner. I think they needed to use him more last season, and he did have that concussion that he suffered at Iowa, forced to miss the Indiana game. And really, and Isaiah Hull, our friend from Wolverines Wire, brought this up to Sharon Moore during the press conference, that injuries have hindered him in the middle of both of the last 2 seasons. He had the hand injury suffered in practice, back in 2021. Then last year he has a concussion at Iowa. But I'm looking on PFF here, his targets. I think his inconsistency has more to do with kind of the way they used him and the way he was the slot. And we know that they ran multiple tight end sets more than half the time last year, so he's not always on the field. But his targets were, going game by game, starting with week 1, 2, 1, 4, 5, 6. That's the Iowa game. 5 when he returns against Penn State, but then 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, and then 6 against TCU in the Fiesta Bowl. And we know that was a massive game. He also had a rushing touchdown, and he should have had another receiving touchdown had the refs not blown the call. So when they use him more, I feel like those are the games where he pops. He had 2 huge touchdowns in the red zone at Penn State 2 years ago. He might have to do that again in Happy Valley on November 11th this year if Michigan wants to come out of there alive. So, excited to watch Roman Wilson this year. Talking to Ben Herbert, too. He said he's bigger. I think we've seen he's up to 192 now. So excited about that. Balance on offense continues to come up, and it doesn't feel like it's just a talking point anymore. At this point, Jim Harbaugh has always said they want to be balanced, but he's also always said, hey, we're going to do what it takes to win. There are multiple ways to travel. You can travel on the ground. You can travel through the air. But Sharon Moore said,
by land, sea, or air is by the way I believe he put it.
Right. So I think he referenced, General Patton is, he would go on the ground, right? And I get it. And I actually kind of like it, because, you're doing what it takes to win these games. And as I've said plenty of times this offseason, I think ultimately that's what they're going to do when the season starts. They're going to care less about what that split looks like and more about how many points are on the board, if they're converting on third downs, if they're getting it done in the red zone, that sort of thing. But it doesn't feel like a talking point anymore. Sharon Moore saying, yeah, we want to be 50-50. He's, and he was asked, is this a change from years past? And he said, well, you always want to be balanced, but, and he said, you just figure out how to do that or whatever. Reading into that, it does feel like it's much more of a concerted effort. And I will say it's not just that, because, I think they realize that the pass game has to be better to win some of those bigger games in the playoff and everything. But also I think they have some more confidence in the pass game this year. So that's going to play a huge factor as well. The fact that you have a second-year starting quarterback. Your take on everybody pretty much echoing the company line, and the fact that we already heard earlier in the week that they started camp coming out throwing quite a bit, working on pass rush, working on the pass game offensively.
It's good to hear that they're repping it a lot. I still have my doubts that this is going to be a team that is that 50-50 balance. I think push comes to shove, as we've said several times, they are going to want to control the line of scrimmage. They are going to want to pound other teams with the run game. And if you're going to put someone in the box to try and stop the run, that's when they'll try to attack you from there. History has obviously shown that, if Georgia's the school that you're looking to supplant, you think about that Alabama team that beat them a couple years ago, again, at least in the SEC championship game, you got them with some of those big plays over the top. And I think the fact that they had to, Blake Corum goes down last year, and by virtue of that, you kind of have to change your identity a little bit. I know that they still found ways to piece together the run game, and Donovan Edwards was still there, but a lot more was put on JJ McCarthy's shoulders. And I think there was some genuine concern about that, until, this time last year, was about the time when JJ started ascending. But remember, he missed all of the spring with the shoulder injury. He didn't really compete for that job until fall camp. And early on in that camp, we had heard that, turnovers and ball security and just not having the finer points down yet was an issue for him. So he finally surges. He takes over the job. You get through the regular season, still mostly within the framework of what you had been doing, right? And then, those last few games, you need more out of him. And I think you got a lot of answers in terms of what you could put on his shoulders. I think JJ basically won them the Ohio State game, with some of the plays he made through the air. I think that he was the reason that they even had a chance to win the TCU game. If there was another quarterback in there, you probably get run off the field in that one. So knowing that you have that weapon that, again, and I have no issue saying this might be a hot take, but when push comes to shove, I think that JJ McCarthy is probably your best and most dangerous offensive player because he does handle the ball so much. So the fact that I don't buy that they're going to be completely balanced, but the fact that they are taking the passing game so seriously, they know what it's going to take to reach that next gear. And I think really what it is you want to be able to zig when your opponent zags in terms of adjustments made on the field, taking what the defense gives you. Everyone and their grandmother knows that you're going to have to try and stop the run to beat Michigan. But if you take away the run, which again, the stats sort of say otherwise, but Ohio State kind of did take the run away against Michigan. And when Michigan had to make plays through the air, it did until late in that game. So yeah, to be able to do all of those things, the only way that you can be adept at any of it is if you rep the hell out of it. We know they can run the football. They've done it as good as anyone in the country that isn't a service academy the last 2 years. So that work being put in is a positive for them.
Yeah, no doubt. It's about having answers, right? It's the same thing that I remember Mike McDonald talking about when he came in with defense, 2 years ago, that they were going to have the answers to, counter what the offense is presenting. And it's kind of the same thing a little bit with the defense. And Sharon Moore said, yeah, we want to be 50-50, but there are going to be some games when we're not. And when the defense takes one thing away, we're going to be able to do the other. And that's, exactly what you're talking about, AB. Let's flip over to the defense. We got to talk with Jesse Minter. But before we do, let's talk about Gametime. We're all going to be going to games this fall. AB, I know we don't have to pay for Michigan tickets, but I'm planning on going to at least 1 or 2 Lions games. And I have used Gametime before they even became a sponsor. I've been a customer of Gametime, getting Lions tickets last year. I actually bought some Lions tickets for my cousin and his wife for a wedding gift. So it can be a stressful process buying tickets, but Gametime is here for you. Lions, Michigan, concerts, shows, all sorts of stuff, killer deals, last minute tickets, best price guarantee. So you can stop stressing over tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you're going to have at that game, at that concert, at that show. Gametime app, very, very easy to use. They have a lot of flash sales, last minute tickets. It's easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. They have the image of the seat view, so you can actually see what your view is going to be, which I love because, you don't know what the stadium's like sometimes if you're going in for the first time. Again, lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, and more. So get out to a Michigan game. Use Gametime, either the app or gametime.co. That is gametime.co. You can use the promo code Wolverine for $20 off your first purchase. So that's your great deal right there. Again, the promo code Wolverine for 20% off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code Wolverine for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. We're also brought to you by Caldera. Caldera Lab has the regimen, which is very, very easy. About a minute in the morning, minute in the evening before you go to bed for men and their facial hygiene. Caldera Lab creates high-performance men's skincare products The regimen, as I mentioned, leads off their product lineup, twice-a-day routine to transform your skin. Caldera Lab knows the skincare world is heavily female-driven and has long been the wild, wild west for men. That's why they're making the solution simple. Regimen includes 3 products, the Clean Slate, the Base Layer, and the Good. The Clean Slate starts and ends your day. The Good is your go-to multifunctional serum at night. Caldera Lab Eye Serum as well. They are the leader in men's skincare, made only with top-tier ingredients, and clinical trials have found 94% of men's skin showed an overall younger-looking appearance after using Caldera Lab for a few weeks. So we have an exclusive offer for you. This is their best offer available anywhere. Use the code MISH23. That's MICH23 at calderalab.com for 20% off right now. Again, 20% off with the code MISH23, MICH23 at calderalab.com, and make unforgettable first impressions that lead to the charming words, "You look younger." Who doesn't love to hear that? 20% off at calderalab.com. Again, the code MISH23, MICH23. So we talked to Jesse Minter earlier today, and the hot topics came up. We'll start with Michigan's second starting cornerback job, or the starting cornerback job on the opposite side of the field to Will Johnson, who I think could be an All-American this year. But everybody's wondering who that is going to be, and he said it's still TBD. They haven't had a scrimmage yet. He said those are going to be really important so they can see those guys in game type of reps. He also said it could go into the season as well with who's playing there. He mentioned the versatility. Some guys like Mike Sainer still, who could play both outside and at the nickel. He said some safeties can come down and play the nickel as well if they need to go that route. But a guy who we heard from earlier in the week on the In the Trenches podcast with John Jansen, Josh Wallace, who's just an impressive dude, as you would expect from a guy who was a 3-time captain at UMass. But he was fun to listen to, and Jesse Minter said that he has come in and been really impressive so far. He thinks he's going to be a pro. He only has 1 year eligibility left, so that would be next year. This dude's going to be a pro. It's kind of like the Roman Wilson thing. I feel good about Josh Wallace being my likely pick at corner, after kind of hearing more about him. But he's going to have to earn it too. There's going to be competition with some of these other guys as well. But Josh Wallace, a pro right now, he said Mike Sainristil and him are like twin brothers. They're everywhere together. Mike Sainristil has taught him everything about this defense. So pretty positive, I think, to hear coming out of the first 7 practices.
Yeah, when you bring in a guy that is an upperclassman and that has played so much college football, I mean, I know there's a lot of excitement around Amorian Walker. I've always maintained I think that's more of a long-term project, kind of a slow burn, slow simmer, so to speak. But when you bring in a guy that has that much experience, one, it's first and foremost, it's insurance. But second of all, those guys don't come here unless they think they have a shot to play a big role. And we've heard good things about Wallace early on. I talked to Mike Sainer still at Big Ten Media Days, and like I said, Josh Wallace has been in his hip pocket, learning the defense and getting involved in all those types of things. So again, we talk about all these position battles that are going to go into the year. I think cornerback is going to be maybe the one that most goes into the season because, like I said, the last few years we've seen DJ Turner emerge halfway through the 2021 season. It seemed like about halfway through last year, although different circumstances. Jamon Green needed to sit out for a bit. Will Johnson was thrust into a bigger role and never looked back. So at some point, I get the feeling whoever starts at corner to begin the year might not be the guy that starts towards the end of the year. And that's fine. And that's good news for Michigan because it means you have good depth there. We don't know if their depth is good at corner right now. I think we have a lot. We know that they have a lot of guys. There are a lot of pieces there that we're confident can play opposite Will Johnson. And that's the thing too. Keeping Will Johnson healthy is maybe the most important task of this whole fall camp because he's going to take away, a quarter to a third of the field all on his own with what he's able to do. So, whoever emerges at that second corner spot, I think that if he's not able to hold it down on his own, they'll be able to do some schematic things to help those guys out. But yeah, so far so good with Josh Wallace.
Who helps the corners, the secondary, they work together. It's a reason why Steve Clinkscale recruits some of the bigger guys on the roster. when he has a chance, it's the pass rush. And that has been improved as well, based on what Jesse Minter was talking about. And he said, yeah, everyone kind of latched onto the quote from Chris Jenkins back in, I think, January about how they're obsessing over pass rush. They know it has to be better. But he said it really has been an obsession, and Chris Jenkins has been leading the charge there. And he said, that they've kind of taken upon themselves. Obviously, the coaching staff is focusing on that too, but it's been player driven, it's been player led, like a lot of the success that Michigan's had over the last couple seasons, which is encouraging to me. And he said that Chris Jenkins, just the way he was talking about how he is becoming an elite pass rusher, even at 305 pounds. It just gave me some more confidence that Chris Jenkins is going to be able to be that guy. And you may not have the Aiden Hutchinson on the outside, but if you can get a little more rush from the inside, if Mason Graham can be better as a pass rusher, maybe than Mozzie Smith, even though he may be, not as good against the run, that sort of thing. If you can piece it together that way, I think you're going to have a real chance to improve that. And Minter said, basically what we've talked about this offseason, they're focusing on having a good enough pass rush with 4 guys on most occasions. You don't want to have to bring guys every single time. Specifically with the edges, though, he, talked about that being another one like quarterback last season that could go into the season where 2 guys start 1 week, 2 guys start the next week, that sort of thing. So I don't know if we're going to see those guys emerge, and they're all still going to play a lot anyway. But until the season really starts and they get some of those game reps. But your thoughts on, Jesse Minter talking about the pass rush?
The pass rush is going to be a rotation throughout this year, I think. I mean, we saw last year that, that 4-man group of Taylor Upshaw and Mike Morris and Jalen Harrell and Yabi Oki. Derek Moore was kind of in that mix too. Braden McGregor was in that mix. Those top 4 guys all played a lot of snaps. So I think it's really just a matter of figuring out what that pecking order looks like. And, each one of those guys, I wrote about this earlier today. I did a mailbag post on the website, so feel free to check that out. Each one of those guys has their own share of questions. For McGregor, it's, can you finish plays more consistently? Can you win more of your one-on-ones? For Jalen Harrell, we know that he's kind of a jack of all trades, but can he hone in and be a little more dangerous as a pass rusher? What's the level of competition jump going to be like for a guy like Josiah Stewart? Derek Moore dropped 20 pounds. How is that going to affect his game and getting to the quarterback? So there's a lot to sort out there. I'm intrigued by the fact, I don't know if I've had a chance to talk about this yet, but very intrigued by the fact that Keyshawn Bennett put on, I think, 16 or 17 pounds. He's up to, I think, 6'4", 257, 258. And I've heard some good things about him behind the scenes. TJ Guy, I feel like, could do some things, if given the opportunity. So, all of a sudden, I mean, it's not, this is the thing. And I talked about this in a hit with someone the other day where, Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo was kind of the bar that was set a couple of years ago. But, you always, like, it's always the conversation with Braden McGregor. Oh, well, is he the next Aiden Hutchinson? It's gotten really, I think that's been a hindrance to him. And a lot of times, they talk about how he's been called baby Aiden and things like that.
But, I mean, they look similar.
They do. I mean, it goes back to high school. They similar body types. They look the same. I get that. I think we need to be careful with those type of one, because that bar is so high, and two, when you invoke, it's kind of crazy to say, but as time goes on, when you invoke an Aiden Hutchinson and even really a David Ojabo, like, I think what Aiden Hutchinson did that last season at Michigan makes him, every bit of a legend that, Charles Woodson was. Now, Charles Woodson won a Natty and won the Heisman, but you know what I mean? Like, that's a guy that you could make a case as a Mount Rushmore type of player. So, the bar was set high. I think that the further we get away from that, there'll be a little less of an expectation that one particular guy can be that. But I like this group that they have. I think they'll figure it out and they'll be able to get to the quarterback.
Yeah, and he said Braden McGregor's looking a lot more confident, walking around, putting on some weight this offseason, or at least some more muscle with Ben Herbert in the weight room. And then he was asked by our Chris Ballas, is Josiah Stewart big enough, or does he have the skill and the talent to play on rundowns as well? And Jesse Minter said he believes he can. He's actually a lot more powerful than you would think out of a guy his size at 6'1", 245. And that he can do that he really, it sounds weird, but his power is one of his better strengths right now in practice. So, that I think is really good to hear. But also he said, yeah, we should be able to piece it together between on that side of the field, Jalen Harrell or Josiah Stewart, depending on situation. Same with Braden McGregor and Derek Moore on the other side of the field, depending on situation, depending on who's hot, depending on what the other team is throwing at them. So I think that is going to be, important for them that they do have that depth, even though they might not have the Aiden Hutchinson. And who does have an Aiden Hutchinson? I mean, defensive player finishing runner-up in the Heisman. I mean, it just doesn't happen. So, yeah, I'm feeling better and better, I think, about the edge group here early on in camp. And then the last thing about the defense is, kind of interesting with the offense. You hear about they want to be more balanced. The defense, Jesse Minter has a specific number for the amount of guys that he feels like they can play in the first half of the first game. He wants more guys to be ready than a year ago. And basically, in short, they want to be deeper. But he wants 26 guys to be able to go in the first half of the first game on defense. They had 22 that played in that situation last year in the season opener when it counted, which was not for long, obviously a blowout win. But I feel like they're there. I mean, they are really close to being there. When you look at linebacker, they improved the depth. When you look at defensive tackle, probably numbers-wise, they have more capable guys that you would trust in there. Certainly in the secondary as well. I feel like guys like Zeke Berry and Keon Saab have emerged. Corner, just in the fact that you have, several guys vying for that starting job, I think gives you maybe not as much promise there, but more depth, guys that you feel like can compete there. But your thoughts on that? I love listening to Jesse Minter too, because he's so calculated and, with what he's talking about. But I feel like they've really improved the depth on this defense. I
think so too. I mean, we just talked about, 4 guys for sure at edge, as many as 5 or 6. I think you've got probably, I'm not going to go through every position group and do the math, but, I think when you look at each group, you've got at least, 3 or 4 guys that can play and make an impact. And the fact that they do have a lot of those battles still going on, points to, I think they will hit that number, is what I'm trying to say. So, yeah, their depth is better. It feels like they're more athletic there across the board as well. And that's what you have to be, to compete on the national stage. So I think they're in a really nice spot here. Yeah, no doubt. And I think also, too, you hear about the competition, and there were a couple of good questions asked about, how do you kind of balance competition and the camaraderie and getting these guys to play together as one. And an example that Jesse Minter brought up was that nobody is in the film room or meeting on the side more with Ernest Hausman, who's pushing for a starting job, than Michael Barrett, who has the starting job. And that kind of speaks to it. It's the same thing that Sharon Moore talked about on the offensive line, where you have these guys going on fishing trips, hanging out, playing video games after practice in the summer, working out together, but they're also vying for a limited amount of starting spots, a limited amount of snaps. But I feel like they've done a really good job with the culture, as we know. Last thing real quick, we have to mention it. The Don, who is just, he's a quote machine these days. Donovan Edwards says that he will go down as one of the greatest running backs to ever play the game, up there with Walter Payton and Barry Sanders. Now, it was a little more nuanced than that, too. Obviously, the headline stood out and the quote stood out, but he talked about revolutionizing the game because he can, both catch passes, be a receiver type, and also be a runner. We've seen what he can do so far in both areas. Obviously, he's only going to get better from here. He said, that he feels like he is going to be, a premier player in the pros. And I wrote about this the other day, but that Jahmyr Gibbs comparison that I know we've brought up on this show before with Detroit Lions rookie running back, went to Alabama. He is going to be such an asset for the Lions this year because of what he can do and how versatile he is in both the pass game and the run game. So I see the same thing for Donovan Edwards. I don't know if he's going to revolutionize the game or be one of the greatest ever, but I think that Donovan Edwards is going to be a real weapon this year and eventually in the NFL. I think he's going to have a really good career. Donovan Edwards is a a phenomenal talent. I think that if he stays healthy, I would love for him to revolutionize staying on the field, because that's been difficult for him to do at times. But listen, I know a lot was made about it. If you're not an athlete at the highest level that has aspirations of, that type of success, I don't know what you're even doing here. Now, are the odds stacked against him to do that? Absolutely. And in terms of revolutionizing the game, I mean, I think of, the things that he does really well, LaDainian Tomlinson was doing years ago, and Christian McCaffrey was doing, 10 years ago, and things like that. So,
and is
doing. And is still doing.
Yeah.
So no disrespect to him at all. It is a quote, that's for sure. And if he can be as good as he believes that he is, I mean, he might be in New York, and Michigan might be the favorite to win it all. But right now, I mean, let's see. I would tap the brakes on that a little bit from a fan base expectation, but the fact that he believes that, I think is there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, shoot your shot, young man.
It's not bulletin board material against another team, like you see. No. It's just kind of, and maybe a team will use it as motivation, but more than anything, I feel like Donovan uses that as his own motivation. So I didn't hate it. I know some people had mixed feelings about someone talking that confidently about himself. And I know I've brought this up before too, but everyone asks for guys to stop doing coach speak and player speak and whatever until they actually do it. And then people are like, you can't say that. No one talks like that. It's like, well, he's being himself. Donovan's a confident kid. So keep doing you, Donovan, as Jim Harbaugh would say. It's working. It has worked so far. So, but definitely easy to write that article, I will say, because quote pops, headline pops, it's a writer's dream. So thank you to Donovan Edwards. But that is going to be our show for this week. Again, make sure to like the video. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button as well. And everybody out there, head to thewolverine.com for all of our Michigan football fall camp coverage. We'll have all the coverage throughout the season, basketball, NIL, transfer portal, recruiting, and more over at thewolverine.com. And we'll see you next time.